The last notes of an extraordinarily beautiful melody faded away, and everyone present froze, as if enchanted, still captivated by the amazing, stirring song. Silence fell over the room, soon to be broken by loud applause and admiring cheers. Arnold snapped out of his stupor, quickly approaching the stage to offer his hand to help the singer down. The girl, who had just sung so beautifully, smiled shyly, her cheeks flushed, and her eyes shining with happiness. "Where was I looking before?" thought the young man. "Such an angel. And I didn't even notice." That evening, his dreary life of monotonous routines unexpectedly gained new meaning. After the death of his last living relative, it seemed like nothing good could happen to Arnold anymore. Loneliness weighed heavily on him, cutting him off from the outside world, constantly reminding him of its presence. Even in the midst of a noisy, cheerful gathering, he felt repulsed and anxious. It had been almost a year since Arnold's father passed away. It had been almost a year since he became truly orphaned. His mother had died even earlier. As an 11-year-old sensitive and emotional boy, he had long mourned the irreplaceable loss, shutting himself off and refusing to show his vulnerability to others. His father, a phlegmatic man, had always been incapable of expressing his own emotions, and now, being alone with his son in a huge empty house, he was utterly lost. Trying to cope with his own emotional suffering, and having no idea how to approach his withdrawn son, he decided that his son definitely needed feminine care and a complete family. Fortunately, a successful businessman, the owner of a large construction company, had never lacked attention from women. Within a year, the man married a statuesque brunette named Janet, who had a son named Parker from her previous marriage, almost the same age as Arnold. Apparently, the head of the family hoped that a stepbrother and a new mother would help the boy out of his depression, but his hopes were only partially realized. The woman did indeed, at first, treat her stepson with due attention, but he adamantly refused to accept her as a replacement for his own mother. And how could he? His mother was calm and affectionate, always listening to him, offering guidance, and helping him make the right decisions, while Janet was her complete opposite. Stern and fiery, she persistently imposed her opinions and compelled everyone to do things her way. True, she raised her own biological son quite differently. Over time, it became apparent that she spoiled her Parker and indulged all his whims. Arnold's father tried to intervene to rectify the situation, wanting to restore peace and harmony to the family. But Janet had already established her own rules in the house, considering herself the rightful mistress, and aggressively reacted to attempts to encroach on her sphere of responsibility. After another argument on this matter, Arnold's father gave up and no longer interfered in household affairs. Trying to distract himself from unpleasant thoughts, he threw himself entirely into his work. He rarely appeared at home, and only occasionally, late in the evening, would he awkwardly sit on the edge of Arnold's bed, with a guilty look, attempting to start a conversation, asking about his studies and his mood. Parker's increasing needs were instantly and unconditionally met. If Parker wanted trendy sneakers like a famous actor's, sure thing. The latest model of a phone. Let's go to the store today. Arnold wasn't demanding. He simply didn't require as many things, toys, and gadgets as his stepbrother, who ruthlessly used, broke, and discarded them. Arnold was content with books and his computer. By the time they reached adulthood, two completely different young men lived under one roof. One, a spoiled guy, fond of nightclubs and youth parties. The other, calm and serious, interested in real, not artificial, life. Dreaming not of consuming but of creating. But both stepbrothers ended up attending the same university, majoring in economics. Arnold found this field intriguing, considering it promising and full of potential, while Parker was only there because his mother insisted, naively believing that eventually he would need to join the family business. Despite performing poorly academically, she already envisioned him as a future businessman. Arnold's father tried to teach them his trade, but only Arnold showed genuine interest. To Parker, all this business seemed dull. The relentless work schedule and internal struggles undermined the head of the family's health. He began to look frail, but stubbornly refused to acknowledge his dire diagnosis until he fell seriously ill. It was only then that Arnold's stepmother became frightened. Finally realizing that their family's financial situation could change drastically for the worse, she persistently urged him to make a will. Exhausted, her husband brushed off her concerns, as everything had long been arranged. Everyone would receive according to their merits and abilities. Arnold took his father's death hard. Many people attended his funeral: neighbors, work partners, subordinates, just acquaintances. Everyone who knew him even a little wanted to pay their respects and bid farewell to the deceased man, who in life was always serious and taciturn, but kind-hearted and honorable. At the sight of the crowd, frozen in silent reverence, Arnold's breath caught in his throat. He had always loved and respected his father, and was sure his father loved him too, in his own way. Only now did he realize the important role his father played in his life. Now he was truly alone. His stepmother wore a luxurious mourning dress with black lace, wiping away tears with a handkerchief and patiently awaiting the reading of the will. Parker disappeared into some noisy company, presumably celebrating his anticipated inheritance. But things didn't go as they had hoped. By the will, the entire business passed entirely to Arnold. Janet was to inherit rights to the house and was appointed head of the construction company's board of directors. Essentially, her position was nominal. Her voice was advisory and had little influence. Most likely, Arnold's father wanted to ensure her a lifelong income in the form of a salary. Parker, on the other hand, received their father's car as inheritance and, as a hint or mockery, a book on finance by a renowned economist. It was impossible not to notice the fury in Janet's eyes after the will was read. Until that moment, she had never doubted that her husband would divide the business equally between the boys. And then this. She turned her contorted face, twisted with anger, toward her stepson, and he physically felt her animosity toward him. She never harbored any particular affection for Arnold, but now she outright despised him. If before the guy was merely annoying, now he had become an insurmountable obstacle on the path to the desired inheritance. Parker didn't even bother to hide his annoyance. He muttered under his breath, turned around, and left, slamming the door behind him. Arnold moved away from that family and immersed himself completely in his work. The fate of the company now depended solely on him, and it was a huge responsibility. Things were going fairly well in business. Both employees and investors knew him well and fully trusted the young heir. Janet, from time to time, would appear at the office, strut around the rooms with an important air, and give unnecessary remarks, pretending to understand all matters. Arnold patiently endured these visits, silently listening to his stepmother, and continued to work as he saw fit. By that time, the company had reached the peak of its capabilities but was holding steady. However, the sudden appearance of a promising foreign investor changed everything. Arnold dreamed of expanding his father's business globally. In memory of him, the boy wanted to reach an entirely new level and prove to himself that he was capable of much. For several months, he negotiated and prepared contracts. Day and night, he designed, calculated, wrote, talked, and argued. And finally, representatives of the investment company decided to pay him a personal visit to ensure compliance with all requirements and settle the final formalities before signing the document. Arnold understood that if everything went well, it would be an incredible breakthrough for his company. The thought excited him immensely. Wanting to achieve an excellent result, he began to inquire about the future partner. It turned out that the hallmark of this corporation was family values. The concept of family as the foundation of life was promoted at all levels. Family traditions were sacredly honored. Employees were even granted additional days off to spend time with their loved ones. Arnold thought it would be wonderful if he could attend the meeting with his wife or at least his fiancée. But Bree, whom he had been dating for the past 6 months, couldn't handle his demanding work schedule and left after a heated argument. Her departure didn't bother him too much. All his relationships seemed to follow the same pattern. Everything was fine at first, but after a month or two, problems, complaints, and scandals would arise. All the girls wanted him to make money and at the same time always be around, entertain his partner, take her to resorts, and shower her with expensive gifts. He didn't see any of them as a true life companion who would stay with him through thick and thin. That's why he broke up with them easily and painlessly. Finding a new girlfriend within 2 days was unrealistic. Sure, there's a whole market of escort services, but a representative of such an agency doesn't quite fit the description of a decent girl. And if the affair goes off script, it could definitely harm the business. He didn't want to take such risks. Suddenly, a young cleaner peeked into his office. "Arnold, when can I come to clean here?" Summer had only recently started working in his office, but she had already earned a good reputation among the staff. Arnold sincerely wondered how such a nice girl with good manners ended up in such a low-prestige position. Usually, there wasn't time to delve into details, but now, in such a hopeless situation, he was ready to consider any options. He didn't even hesitate or ponder his decision. "Summer, please come in and have a seat." He offered her a chair and carefully studied the girl. Her light blonde shiny hair was neatly tied back. Her pale, porcelain-like face had symmetrical features. Her eyes sparkled with intelligence and kindness, qualities that are increasingly rare these days. Her modest attire hinted at significant financial difficulties in her life. She shrank under the young man's prolonged, penetrating gaze. "Summer, I have a proposal for you," Arnold said. The girl blinked in surprise. The unexpected interest of her boss in her modest person both excited and alarmed her. "Actually, it's a huge favor," the boss corrected himself, noticing the effect his words had. "Not exactly that. I need your help, Summer." The girl immediately calmed down and asked, "What do you need me to do, Arnold?" "Clean somewhere." The young man hesitated for a moment, trying to find the right words, but unable to figure out how to present his request. He quickly blurted out, "Summer, I'm asking you to be my girlfriend for one evening." The cleaner raised her eyebrows in surprise. The phrase sounded so rude and ambiguous out loud that the young man felt embarrassed and hurried to correct the situation. "You see," Arnold began to explain, "in 3 days, a delegation from a serious investment fund is coming. There's an informal meeting planned at a restaurant, and I need to have a partner, not just any girl, but specifically a fiancée. Do you understand?" Summer watched her boss's facial expression with distrust, trying to understand if he was joking or not. "I'm begging you," he pleaded earnestly. "Help me out. It's just for one evening." "But why me?" she asked. He looked at her with his sincere eyes and decided to tell her everything honestly. "There's no time for searching, and no desire either. I'd rather spend a few more days working on the contract than look for someone for just one evening. But there's a secretary, and there are several girls in the accounting department," the cleaner persisted. Arnold mentally envisioned his secretary Vicky as his fiancée at first, then 2 chubby accountants, and smiled. "You fit the bill best. Plus, I think you could use the quarterly bonus," he said surprisingly candidly. To his surprise, Summer appreciated such frankness. "All right," she said decisively. "I'm ready to help. What do I need to do?" This question caught Arnold off guard. He shrugged and said, "I guess we need to go to the store and get you an outfit for the occasion. Dress, shoes. What else?" The girl blushed shyly and lowered her gaze, hiding her feet, clad in worn-out old sneakers, under the chair. "Oh, Arnold, come on. I have a dress. I still have one from my prom," she replied. The head of a major construction company's bride-to-be should be dressed in a special way. Sorry for being so direct. In the mall, Arnold deliberately chose the fanciest boutique and dragged the girl there with great effort. At the sight of expensive dresses, Summer alternated between blushing and paling. but obediently went into the fitting room. When she timidly emerged a few minutes later, Arnold was stunned. She was a completely different person. In an elegant dress, high-heeled shoes, and with her thick hair cascading down, the girl looked simply stunning. The image seemed so natural, as if she had always dressed like that. There was no trace left of the shy cleaner. Before Arnold's eyes stood a girl from high society. With her wouldn't be ashamed to appear at any event, even of the highest level. A prestigious car with tinted windows pulled up to the restaurant, where a private room had already been reserved. Two men in respectable suits and a tall, vulgarly dressed, middle-aged woman with glasses emerged from it. Arnold, arm in arm with his fake fiancée, was already waiting for the important guests at the entrance to the building. Despite the presence of a translator, the young man himself began to speak with them. "Hello, very glad to see you. Let me introduce my fiancée, Summer," he said. "Oh, Summer." The foreigners warmly nodded, shaking hands with them. Arnold's stepmother, Janet, stood nearby. Arnold didn't show any surprise at her appearance. Most likely, the woman had her spies in the office ready to inform her of all the boss's movements. Janet, in her element, meticulously monitors his every move, not to miss the moment when he makes a mistake and take over her late husband's company. "I'm Janet, Arnold's mother," she smiled, introducing herself to the guests. "Stepmother," he corrected her calmly, ignoring her stepson's sarcastic remark. She continued, "I'm the head of the supervisory board of our company with Arnold. And this is my second son, Parker. He's also a future businessman, graduating from university with honors." She spoke so quickly that the translator could barely keep up with her. Arnold just smirked, watching his relative's pathetic attempts to impress the investors. He hoped it would end there, but he was wrong. Throughout the next hour, his stepmother stuck to the foreign guests like glue, incessantly rambling about helping her late husband build the business, trying, at least in small ways, to undermine Arnold and the girl he introduced as his fiancée. "Summer comes from a wonderful family," Janet suddenly declared, perhaps remembering seeing Summer in the office with the mop in hand. "She's had an impeccable education and speaks foreign languages fluently. She can even sing for you. Let's ask her." She applauded, urging everyone to join in. Arnold tried to intervene, but Janet brushed him aside and didn't let him get a word in. The foreigners were delighted and genuinely wanted to hear his fiancée sing. "We're all waiting," the woman exclaimed with a wicked smirk, pushing the girl towards a small stage. She desperately wanted to publicly humiliate Summer by any means necessary. What an audacity for a mere cleaner to show up in high society, let alone help her sworn enemy. And Arnold was utterly at a loss, not knowing how to get out of this unpleasant situation. Poor girl. His head pounded. She must be terrified. But, to his surprise, Summer calmly and confidently approached the DJ and whispered something in his ear. The melody from a famous movie began to play. The girl brought the microphone to her lips, and the sounds of soprano filled the room. The guests, as if enchanted, listened to the beautiful song in their native language and softly sang along. Men took out their mobile phones and recorded everything. Arnold, unable to move or look away, stood right in front of the beautiful and talented girl. All the listeners were delighted with such an unexpected surprise. They approached the singer and expressed their sincere admiration. Slightly embarrassed, the girl bowed and thanked everyone for the compliments. Only the pale-faced Janet suddenly screamed, "She's not his fiancée at all. She's just a plain cleaner from our office." But this statement had the opposite effect. The foreigners either didn't understand her or took the woman's statement as a joke and started to admire how talented the employees were. This infuriated Janet even more, and she stormed out of the room without even saying goodbye. Parker, looking disdainfully at his stepbrother, leisurely followed her out. "Well, what now?" he asked his mother on the street. "So far, nothing has worked," she said, trying to calm down. He wriggled out. The scoundrel. "Well, never mind, darling. I'll come up with something else sooner or later. It will all work out for us." Parker frowned and clenched his fists in anger. "That's it. I've had enough," he said furiously. "I'm done with your brilliant ideas. We need to take drastic action," he declared decisively. "I'll handle it myself." With these words, he turned around and strode towards his car. "What are you planning, son?" Janet called after him, but Parker didn't even look back. He now knew exactly what to do. The rest of the evening at the restaurant passed in a friendly atmosphere. Now nothing hindered the business communication between potential partners. The young director discussed all the issues that interested him and the investors, and the guests finally approved the future deal. Arnold didn't take his car today to have the opportunity to share a couple of glasses of wine with the guests for the success of their joint venture. So, after bidding farewell to the satisfied foreigners, he took a taxi and decided to personally escort Summer home. Sitting next to her in the back seat, he felt an extraordinary excitement. No girl had ever aroused such feelings in him before. The soft natural scent emanating from her hair, the graceful profile, the accidental touch of her shoulder when the car made a sharp turn, this whole indescribable range of sensations overwhelmed him, not allowing him to come to his senses. No, not like that. Only now did he truly become himself. In this state, next to this girl, he felt real, strong, confident. And he liked himself like this. At the entrance, the young people stood silently for a while, looking at each other and reading their thoughts in each other's eyes. Neither of them wanted to part. Some thin, invisible thread bound them, not allowing them to break the established distance. "Summer, can I ask you something?" The guy finally dared to break the silence. "Of course," she replied. Her smile and pleasant voice sent shivers down Arnold's spine. "You're so young, beautiful, educated. Why do you work as a cleaner?" She laughed in response. "Thank you for the compliment. Of course, but I just finished regular school. I've always had a knack for learning foreign languages since childhood. And I also used to sing. I even won competitions." She suddenly fell silent and continued with sadness. "But seriously, my older sister is seriously ill. She broke her hip almost a year and a half ago, and her bones still haven't healed. Now she can barely move around on crutches. We are waiting for her turn to get a joint replacement." She sighed heavily. "And we still have to live somehow. Disability benefits are barely enough for anything." "And where are your parents?" he asked. "They passed away 2 years ago. They were already quite old. I was their late child," the girl replied, paused, and then added, "So I had to look for a job right after school. But where would they hire me without a higher education? You understand?" The guy immediately responded, "Yes. My fiancée really has a difficult fate." Blushing and feeling embarrassed, the girl timidly said, "I thought it was only for this evening." Arnold took her hand and whispered softly, "I would really like it to be forever." The narrow palm of this girl turned out to be warm and pleasant to the touch. The young man pressed it to his lips and felt a gentle tremor. "See you tomorrow," he whispered to Summer, making a huge effort to let go of her. "Goodbye," she replied, looking back with great regret in her eyes. Summer dashed into the apartment and shouted worriedly from the threshold, "Courtney, I'm home. Are you okay?" From the bedroom came the response, "Hi, darling. Everything's fine." Summer's older sister was sitting in bed with a book in her hands. Crutches stood nearby, the young woman's constant companions since some time ago. In reality, reading didn't go well. Courtney's mind was tense, awaiting her younger sister's return from this strange evening. Only when the front door slammed shut could she breathe a sigh of relief. The extraordinary excitement on Summer's face was immediately noticeable. Her radiant eyes and happy smile were impossible to hide. "Tell me, how did it all go?" she said, setting the book aside. There was quite a big age difference between them, and Courtney had always been more than just a sister to Summer. She was both a sister, a mother, and a friend at the same time. Summer could share any, even the most intimate secrets with her, And 2 years ago, when their elderly parents passed away one after another, they became even closer, practically becoming one. Summer laughed and even embarrassedly covered her face with her hands, then removed them and said, "I think I'm in love." "Who's the lucky guy?" Courtney asked with a smile, affectionately embracing her younger sister by the shoulders. She reminded of herself in her youth. "Arnold," she whispered, as if afraid someone would overhear her secret confession. "I think it's mutual. He's just the best." The sisters hugged each other and laughed happily. The next morning, Arnold woke up feeling an unusual lightness and relaxation. It was as if he had found something long lost but very dear to his heart. The constant tension and stiffness left his body. The anticipation of troubles and problems vanished from his soul. Early rays of sunlight peered through the window, heralding a beautiful day. He stretched and remembered the previous evening. The lovely image appeared before his eyes. Summer, an amazing girl. What talent and potential were hidden in this fragile, modest girl? These thoughts made him smile involuntarily. Arnold briskly got out of bed, gulped down a cup of coffee, and got ready for work. Even the elevator was moving too slowly today. In such an excited mood, he had no patience to wait for it. The guy couldn't resist and rushed down the stairs on foot. He wasn't running. He was literally flying. It seemed to him that wings had grown behind his back, carrying him forward, towards his love. Yes, precisely love. This feeling unexpectedly completely captured his heart and mind. Work and ambitions were pushed to the background. The guy settled into the driver's seat, started the engine, and glanced at the clock. There was still an hour before the office opened, but he couldn't sit still anymore. He needed movement. He wanted to release the built-up energy. So Arnold decided to go for a drive. The stretch of road was still completely deserted, the highway disappearing up towards the horizon, almost merging with the green of the trees. His foot pressed forcefully on the gas pedal, yet the speed wasn't felt. Joyful thoughts overwhelmed his mind. Right now, he would let out his emotions on this stretch of road. Then he would turn into the city at the exit, drive straight to Summer's house, and wait for her outside. She would be surprised and delighted. After all, he clearly felt her reciprocal feelings yesterday. He loved this idea and wanted to pick up even more speed to reach his destination faster and catch the girl before she left for work. Approaching a huge speed, he neared the fork in the road and, fearing to miss it, braked sharply. However, the brake pedal didn't respond and unexpectedly sank into emptiness. Everything happened in an instant, and it was impossible to avoid the danger. The last thing Arnold remembered was a ravine rushing towards him. And darkness. Janet, in a new business suit with carefully styled hair, entered the office. Behind her, Parker followed languidly, with a self-satisfied expression on his face. No one had ever seen him so ceremoniously dressed here before. All the employees froze, awaiting the official announcement, as rumors about the fate of the young boss were circulating. But no one really knew anything. "Good afternoon, everyone," the woman said loudly. "You've probably already heard about the terrible tragedy that befell our family. Arnold was in an accident and is currently in a coma." She briefly portrayed sadness and dabbed her perfectly dry eyes with a tissue. After observing the pause required by decency, Janet resumed her speech. "But life goes on," she declared briskly. "Business must not suffer under any circumstances, and you must not lose your jobs." Emphasizing the last phrase, she looked around at those present and proudly announced, "Therefore, as the chairman of the board of directors, I proposed appointing Parker, Arnold's brother, as the acting director until the situation is clarified." And my proposal was supported. "So, please welcome him." She ceremoniously gestured towards her own son. Silence hung heavy in the air. Summer, who had stubbornly refused to believe the rumors until the last moment, stood shocked, with her eyes wide open. Could this really be true? Arnold, who just 2 days ago had held her hand tenderly and looked into her eyes, now in the hospital. Well, back to work now. Janet clapped her hands, urging everyone to start working, and immediately approached the cleaner. "Except for you, you're fired." "Fired? Why?" the girl blurted out. She hadn't expected such a turn of events. With a smirk, the woman said, "We don't need imposters and actresses here. You'll be better off singing somewhere else." Stumbling, Summer trudged home. Anxiety and confusion froze in her chest. She had no idea what to do next. The whole world had collapsed in an instant. Once again, she would have to look for a new job and settle for low-paying work. Once again, she would have to get used to a new team. And most importantly, what would happen to Arnold and their budding beautiful feelings were uncertain. Arnold, kind, sweet. Some inner impulse made her stop and completely change her route. Suddenly, her legs led her towards the hospital. She felt an irresistible desire to see the young man, even in such a helpless state. Someone in the office had mentioned which hospital they had taken Arnold to. For some reason, Summer felt like she had to be there, as if the life of this young man depended on her. This burning sensation suppressed all other thoughts and emotions, giving her strength. But she was categorically refused entry to the intensive care unit, and they didn't even want to talk about the patient's condition. "Miss, all information is for relatives only. Those are the rules." Both the doctors and nurses reiterated the same phrase. "And if I'm his fiancée," to which she received a clear, unsatisfactory answer. "Only relatives, no fiancés." Pleading didn't work either. The girl sighed heavily and turned towards the exit. Unexpectedly, her eyes fell on a printed notice on a piece of paper. "An orderly is urgently needed in the intensive care unit. Inquire at the HR department." That's it. Fate generously gave her opportunities, pointing her in the right direction on her complex life path. "This is exactly what I need," the girl exclaimed joyfully and set off to find the right office. On the way home, uncertainty crept back into her heart, along with sadness and anxiety. Courtney immediately sensed that something had happened. She made it to the hallway on crutches and lovingly embraced her sister, finally letting her emotions out. Summer cried loudly. From the fragments of phrases, her sister could barely understand what had happened. "Don't cry, Summer. We'll get through this," she comforted her younger sister. "You did everything right. If your heart told you so, then it must be. Everything will be fine." And Summer kept crying and crying, burying her face in the familiar shoulder of her beloved sister. How lucky she was to have Courtney. The new job turned out to be much more challenging than the previous one. Almost all the time was spent washing, wiping, and caring for the sick. Endless containers of disinfectant solutions, special equipment, and, most importantly, the heavy burden on the soul from seeing suffering people, which, being unaccustomed, caused horror and deep shock. And the salary was significantly more modest than in the office. However, Summer didn't complain. The team was friendly and welcoming. And although she was deliberately assigned the most unpleasant and difficult tasks right from the start, it turned out that this was a usual test for new employees. Only the most responsible and resilient people could work in the intensive care unit. Summer passed the test and was accepted into the strong medical family. It was a completely different world, radically different from what remained behind the clinic walls. Here, there was a constant struggle for human life, but saving lives was considered an ordinary everyday task. Doctors ready to react instantly to any extraordinary situation. Nurses diligently moving around the hospital wards with 4 stands and a large number of syringes and medications. Summer was glad to be involved in such a noble cause. But most of all, she was happy that she could now often visit the ward where Arnold lay. Seeing him in such a helpless state for the first time, the girl couldn't hold back her tears. Deathly pale, with dark blue circles around his eyes, motionless, and seemingly lifeless. The only indication that the guy was alive was the data on the monitor standing next to him. "It's a traumatic brain injury and, as a result, a coma," whispered Nurse Gillian to the new orderly. And how long can it last? Summer asked hoarsely. I don't know, shrugged Jillian. No one knows. There are cases when people lie like this for years. Sometimes they just die. Noticing that Summer's lips trembled after these words, she asked, is he someone you know? My fiancé. The girl unexpectedly answered herself and sobbed. Jillian sympathetically sighed and, in a friendly manner, firmly squeezed the unfortunate Summer's shoulder. Hang in there, dear, and talk to him. They, supposedly, hear everything. Following this advice, the young orderly spent all her free time by Arnold's bedside. At first, she didn't know what to talk about with someone who couldn't respond to her, or perhaps couldn't hear anything at all. Summer just talked about what happened in the office after the accident, about her new job. Gradually, she got used to this one-sided communication. She felt the urge to talk about herself and her family. Neither Janet nor Parker showed up at the hospital. Maybe they were inquiring about the patient's condition over the phone, or maybe they decided not to worry at all. The week passed very quickly. More and more often, Summer found herself thinking that she felt right at home here. Back in school, when choosing a profession, she couldn't decide. The new job brought her new experiences and a new perspective on things. Maybe this was her calling, to help people and alleviate their suffering. Yes, she wanted to dedicate her life to medicine. The phone call from Janet was a big surprise. The girl didn't even realize who she was talking to at first. Summer, darling, said the woman with an unusually affectionate voice, as if nothing had happened. Why aren't you coming to work? As far as I remember, you fired me. The girl replied in confusion. Oh, come on, exclaimed Janet. Maybe I said something extra, but you can understand me. My son is in a coma. I'm very nervous. She sobbed loudly, and then casually added, come to work tomorrow. We'll count these days as vacation. The new management cares about its employees. Summer immediately realized that something was wrong here. So her response was unequivocal and firm. Thank you for the offer, but I've already found a new job and don't plan to come back. Very unfortunate, came a disappointed sigh over the phone. Well, then at least come and pick up your settlement. Tomorrow at 12. 12 is inconvenient for me. I'm really asking you, insisted the woman. Exactly at 12. There's also a bonus for the past quarter. Although Summer understood that Janet was up to something, she really needed the money. Fine, she reluctantly agreed. I'll come tomorrow. With a fake smile, Janet greeted Summer right in the lobby as if she were an esteemed guest. Summer, dear, I'm so glad to see you. She rushed to meet her. Let's go to Parker's office. The girl stopped and demanded in a determined voice, Janet, tell me what you need from me. Why can't I get my settlement from the accounting department? What's with all the intrigue? She was quite serious and showed with her whole demeanor that she wouldn't budge without explanations. The woman tried to be cunning again, but then she had to admit, you see, Summer, the video from that evening where you performed the song so wonderfully ended up with the owner of the investment company we're contracting with. For some reason, he's eager to meet with you. He arrived on the morning flight today and went straight to our office. Why does he want to meet with me? The girl wondered. Well, I don't know. Janet shrugged in puzzlement. In the office where Summer was persuaded to go, the new boss sat in the director's chair in complete bewilderment, watching as a tall man in a luxurious light gray suit nervously paced in front of him. When he saw the girl enter, the man turned to her and froze, carefully studying her face. Hello, she greeted the foreign guest. Hello, Summer, he replied in her native language. Oh, sorry, I thought you were the foreigner who was waiting for me. She looked questioningly at Janet, but she only stared in astonishment at the guest. Apparently, this was also a surprise for her. Yes, I have been living abroad for a long time, confessed the guest, but I was born and raised here. When I was 17, our family immigrated. He approached Summer closer and continued to scrutinize her features. Remarkable. he muttered, and then realized, "I apologize for such intrusive behavior, but you look so much like my fiancée, who died in a car accident." He looked so touching and sincere that Summer felt sorry for him. "You must have loved her very much," Summer supposed, looking at him sympathetically. "Yes," he answered thoughtfully. "We were so young, and our feelings were so real. That's something you never forget. We were planning to get married, but fate had other plans." Sadness filled his eyes, but he quickly composed himself and asked, "Summer, have you been living in this city for a long time? Do you have a family?" "My fiancée was from another town. I never found her grave. Maybe you're related. We've been living here all our lives." The girl smiled. "Just the two of us now, me and my sister. No one else." By the way, an unexpected thought came to her. Maybe she knows some of our distant relatives. She really wanted to help this foreigner. "Let's go to our place," she suggested. "I'll treat you to some delicious tea. And at the same time, we'll ask my sister about everything." "Courtney, I have a guest. Come out," Summer called, opening the front door. Supporting herself on crutches, Courtney came out of the bedroom with a smile and froze in place. The guest stared at her in shock. "Courtney, oh my God, is it really you?" he exclaimed and rushed to the young woman. Courtney even dropped her crutch in surprise. "Billy," she breathed out and gently hugged the man. Summer couldn't understand anything. "Courtney, do you two know each other?" she said. "Courtney, my love," the foreigner muttered, gently embracing the young woman with the crutch in one hand. In Summer's mind, it was as if a puzzle had come together. Billy. She had heard this name from her older sister before. Once, she had pestered her with questions about why Courtney hadn't gotten married. Reluctantly, Courtney had told her curious little sister that a long time ago, a guy broke her heart, and she didn't want to repeat that. Yes, she had mentioned that name. "Of course, we know each other," the man exclaimed. "This is my fiancée." "But what happened?" He turned to Courtney. "I thought you were dead. I was told that you and your whole family died." "Who told you that?" the woman asked in surprise. "My parents. Did they lie to me?" he exclaimed, grabbing his head in despair. "How could this be? They never really liked me," Courtney said sadly and smiled sadly. "And I thought you had forgotten about me. I wrote to you many times. I never received any letters." Billy shook his head. "If only I had known." Summer decided that she needed to take full responsibility for the situation. She sat the lovers down at the kitchen table and brewed her signature tea for them. "Everything's ready," she said, pouring the fragrant drink into 2 cups. "You guys talk, and I'll go to my room." But her older sister stopped her. "Summer, please don't go. Stay with us." Summer was surprised, but complied with the request and fetched another cup. The story she heard turned out to be amazing and dramatic. Courtney and Billy had loved each other since high school. Everyone was sure that this couple would be together for life. Only Billy's parents strongly disapproved of his choice. They had long been preparing for emigration and constantly told their son, "Billy, she's not the one for you. In the new country, you'll find girls from good families. We won't be able to take this girl with us anyway." Billy responded quite emotionally to such statements. "You don't understand. I love her, for real. Then I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay here with her." His parents shook their heads disapprovingly and continued to persuade their son. "Son, you're still too young. You'll meet 1,000 more girls like her." But they couldn't convince him. Only when Billy started looking for a local university to attend did they finally give up. They agreed that they would leave together, and within a year, Billy would return, marry Courtney, and take his rightful wife with him. But after the move, the communication between the lovers was cut off almost immediately. Billy's parents informed him of the tragedy. Courtney's entire family died in a car accident. It was a heavy blow for Billy. The young man fell into depression, suffered, yearned to go to his beloved's grave, but at first, he wasn't allowed because of bureaucratic issues, And then he panicked himself. He was afraid to see a mound of clay instead of his fiancée. He wanted to preserve her image in his memory as she was in life. A few years later, he married, but he divorced very quickly. He never encountered a girl like Courtney again, and living with a woman he didn't love was unbearable. Last year, he finally decided to come back to find the graves of his beloved and her family. But no matter how much he searched, no one knew or remembered this family. Billy fell silent and gently took Courtney's hand. "Tell me how you lived, my dear." The woman fell silent, sighed heavily, and shared her part of the sad story of two separated hearts. What she had kept deep in her soul for many years poured out into an unexpectedly sorrowful narrative. After her beloved left, Courtney realized she was pregnant. She kept it to herself until she couldn't hide her rounded belly anymore, for she was only 16. She only wrote letters abroad, patiently waiting for her beloved to come for her. After all, back then, she believed all problems would solve themselves. But there was no news from Billy. Courtney lost all hope. Did he really abandon her? What about those words? Those solemn promises? Was it all lies? How could she trust anyone after that? What was she supposed to do next? When her belly became too round to conceal, she had to confess everything to her parents. Courtney still remembers that horrible evening. At the family council, her mother kept grabbing her head and heart, endlessly saying, "Oh, God, what a disgrace. What will people say?" Her father remained silent, looking at his daughter from under his thick eyebrows, and his silent disapproval made her feel even worse. Finally, the head of the family said, "Okay, enough shouting. We are moving to another city. I've been offered a good job there." Courtney's mother happily agreed and sighed with relief. It was better this way. Among strangers, no one would know about their family shame. After the move, Courtney gave birth to a healthy girl, and her mom and dad persuaded her to register the baby under their names and decided to raise her as their youngest daughter. They thought it would be better. The young mother was so young and confused, crushed by the betrayal of her beloved. So she agreed to everything they suggested. After her parents' death, Courtney wanted to reveal the family secret to Summer many times, but she couldn't find the strength and determination. And then this trauma and disability happened. All confessions were postponed until better times, and only the appearance of Billy changed everything. Courtney, with a guilty look, looked at the girl she had called her sister for the past 18 years. Large tears rolled down her cheeks. "Summer, you're my daughter," she said with a trembling voice full of excitement. "Forgive me for not telling you earlier. I'm guilty before you. I love you very much. Forgive me." The girl was in shock, trying to comprehend what she had just heard. Her sister, her mother, and this unfamiliar man, her father. Billy, struck dumb by his beloved's unexpected confession, looked at the young girl sitting across from him. "Yes, Billy, she's your daughter," the woman said, guessing her beloved's thoughts. "It's unbelievable," the man whispered, still unable to fully accept this information. All these years, not only was his fiancée alive, but he also had a biological daughter. How much time he lost in ignorance. How many years of family happiness were stolen from him. For a while, the father and daughter looked at each other in amazement. But upon hearing Courtney's cries, they rushed to comfort her. "Forgive me, Summer," she said through tears. "And you, Billy, forgive me for thinking poorly of you. Forgive me. Forgive me." "Well, what are you talking about?" they both insisted. "We love you. Don't cry. Everything's fine." And so, a new family was born at that table. The shift at the hospital started quite challenging, and Summer was only able to free herself by lunchtime. Finally, the moment she had been waiting for all morning had arrived. "Arnold, hey, how are you today?" the girl cheerfully asked as she entered the room. "I missed you so much over the weekend." She had grown accustomed to talking to him like this. Sometimes it seemed to her that he, holding his breath, listened to her carefree monologue. and sometimes she thought she saw a smile on his face. She probably invented these signs herself, but it was still nice to think that Arnold understood everything. In the last month, a lot had happened in Summer's life, and she detailed everything to the guy. How her sister disappeared and her mother appeared, and how her father was found. And also, how he took Courtney with him, how she had a successful operation, and she would soon be working on her own, and then they would have a real wedding. Billy persuaded Summer to go abroad with them, but upon learning who she was working for in the hospital, he immediately agreed with the girl, taking a promise from her to visit them as often as possible. Love conquers all. Darling, have hope and wait, he said to his daughter before their departure, gently pressing her head to his chest. Love conquers all, she repeated thoughtfully aloud, and glanced at Arnold. His finger on his hand unexpectedly twitched. His eyelids suddenly fluttered open, and the monitor let out a shrill beep. The girl leaned over him, holding her breath. The corners of his mouth twitched and formed a slight smile. Summer, Arnold said softly, you were in my dream. Coming out of a coma, Arnold slowly recovered and learned to move and walk again. Summer was always by his side, and that was the greatest happiness. The news that Janet and Parker managed to destroy the company saddened him. Investors, seeing the incompetence of the new management, simply terminated all contracts and began the process of bankruptcy for the company. The business that Arnold's father carefully created and built over the years was destroyed literally within a couple of months. Moreover, another horrifying fact emerged. The examination showed that the braking system in Arnold's car had been intentionally damaged, and the investigation into this matter clearly indicated Parker's involvement in the event. It turned out that in pursuit of wealth, the young man was ready for any sacrifices. But having achieved what he wanted, he couldn't even hold on to it. Arnold painfully realized how people who were considered his family not so long ago could commit such an act. From his fiancée, the young man couldn't hide the sadness in his eyes. She understood him well. Arnold, she said once, I talked to my father. He's willing to become a permanent investor in your new company. Do you want to rebuild everything from scratch? Start over. His radiant gaze and joyful smile were the answer to the question. He was ready to start working right away. And will you be my business partner? He asked Summer. I could use some help. I have huge plans. I'll build beautiful, comfortable homes. No, she laughed. I've already decided that I'm going to medical school in the fall. I'm going to heal people. How unexpected. The guy smiled. He hugged his fiancée and buried his face in her silky hair, inhaling their intoxicating scent. How happy he was to be with her. How much he loved her. Love conquers all, he suddenly said and was surprised. Where do I know this phrase from? I keep repeating it. Summer smiled tenderly, hugged him, and kissed her beloved right on the lips. What does it matter? Let it remain a mystery.